Good morning. It's Tuesday, October 15th. I'm Elizabeth Hasselbeck. All eyes on Washington today as Senate leaders inch closer to a deal, but that doesn't stop the nasty rhetoric from Democrats.
When you start acting like you're committing domestic abuse, you've got a problem.
Did that sound like civility to you? I'm not sure, but we're just going to report and you decide.
That's all. Meanwhile, the barricades they tore down already back up in Washington, D.C., but our nation's heroes are not backing down. We're going to tell you what they are doing this morning at 9:45 in D.C.
All right, now you see her, now you do not. Selena Gomez takes a nasty spill in the middle of her concert. That wasn't in the script. How did she recover? Did she recover? Had she quit the business, gone back into sitcoms?
What are you
All those
talking
questions
about?
we'll answer shortly after this pricey animation.
Hey, this is Joe Theismann, and you're watching Fox and Friends. And they're all friends of mine.
And Joe is a friend of ours. Welcome aboard, folks, live from Studio E in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. But of course, you're not interested in us. You're wondering whether or not the government's going to continue to close down. We're going to hit that debt ceiling. The president yesterday was doing his best to scare the markets, but it looks like at the 11th hour, a deal could be close.
That's right. There's a possible framework being built up right now, and in the Senate, they're looking to do a couple of things: reopen the government until January 15th, 2014. Okay, so then
Get us through the holidays. We'll be back in this mess.
Exactly, through all of our shopping there. Debt limit extension until mid-February, and then the Obamacare provision. The HSS must verify Obamacare applicants before they receive subsidies. Now, in the thousands and thousands of pages, that part wasn't included.
But by the way,
No verification.
It was the honor system before.
why was that a plus for Republicans? Shouldn't that be a plus for anybody? If you don't belong in the country, you shouldn't be getting Obamacare from taxpayer dollars because you're not paying taxes.
Well, maybe that's it, Brian.
So
maybe
here's
some people who are in this country and could then benefit from it
So here you have a situation where you get really three things. You get the debt ceiling raised. That's good for the president. You have the government back being funded. That's good for everybody. But then you have a situation where the Republicans don't seem to be getting much bang for their dollar. The only thing they're getting is verification, and they're only going to get it if they give up this thing called a belly button tax, which is a big $65 for a subsidy, which seems to be mostly going to the unions. And so they're not even getting the verification unless they give the belly button tax, as they call it, and how appropriate it is that I introduced the belly button tax since I introduced this belly button to supermodel talk.
There you go. Well, you know what? The president, he said he wasn't going to negotiate, and yet he had to negotiate. He said he wanted a clean CR and a clean debt ceiling. He's getting dirty both. And he said he would not touch the Affordable Care Act, and they are tinkering with it. Nonetheless, I get where the Republicans were going in. John Boehner's got his hands full.
Right.
But then you look over at the Senate side and you wonder, well, who are Mitch McConnell dealing with? He's dealing with people like Barbara Boxer. We're at the 11th hour. It looks like a deal is done. And what does she do? Out of her bag of insults, she pulls this one.
When you start acting like you're committing domestic abuse, you've got a problem. I love you, dear, but, I'm shutting down your entire government. I love you, dear, but I'm going to default and you're going to be weak.
And that's part of the reason why the House is going to be looking at this and saying, that's the attitude we're getting. This is the deal we're getting. Boehner, Cantor, and Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy are going to sit down. They're going to say, this is what we've been talking about. This is what we got. And I just don't see how the House turns around and goes, sounds good to me. The House that said they wanted to fund Obamacare, then delay Obamacare, then talk about attacking the deficit. I don't see anything. And why would you put together a proposal which is in the best interest of the country?
What do you want him to do?
But
What do you want him to do?
let me finish. In the best interest of the country that has over $17 trillion in debt. How could that be in anybody's best interest? How could a Democrat say this is a victory for us? Well, for what country?
Could I just reverse this car 1 second, go back to Barbara Boxer? Because on behalf of women who have suffered the oppression of any sort of abuse within their home or for someone that supposedly cares for them, for her to go and trivialize and minimize domestic abuse in any way and compare it to political negotiations seems to me, it seems so wrong that I bet that all the women's groups around there will be awfully quiet today. Everyone should be loud about Barbara Boxer's comments today, and they're concerned about, well, how does this make politicians look? No, how does it minimize the abuse that women suffer under the hand of someone who's been wronging them and putting them under oppression? This is, to me, on the eve of peace, where we're looking at a deal possibly being done, to go and minimize the abuse that women face, unfortunately, millions of them every day, is... I'm beside myself that she would go there.
It's over the line.
It is.
Just add that to the list, though. Meantime, let's tell you a little bit about this. We know you've been very interested. You were very interested in the March on Washington, the Million Vets March that took place on Sunday. There's another one today, as it turns out. The Military Coalition Unites to End the Government Shutdown is going to kick off this morning at 9:45 at the World War II Memorial, just as and there you can see some of the activities on Sunday. Just like Sunday, what they're interested in is restoring the military death benefits. The National Guard has canceled their drills, affecting readiness. Also, the Department of Veterans Affairs has a backlog of disability claims, and a third of the Veteran Benefits Administration has been furloughed. So there are a lot of veteran issues out there that simply have been going by the by. And so they hope that a lot of people, in fact, this organization is really 33 different groups, will be showing up starting today at 9:45 at the World War II Memorial.
That's right. They represent, I think, over 5 million individuals and veterans, and they have reason to be concerned. The VA has been backlogged going into this situation. If we go through October, all of those claims could come to a complete halt. So they have reason to be there today marching with cause.
Dennis Michael Lynch was there this past weekend. He was on last night with Megyn and talked about what he saw as he took these exclusive pictures.
When they carried those barricades, they were carrying America. When they took those barricades and they threw them in front of the White House, they were throwing the frustration of every American who has lost it, because this is the way that D.C. operates, divisive. Until this country comes back together, we don't have a chance. And the only way that this country is coming back together is through the American people. The politicians aren't going to do it.
Amen.
So yesterday, if you look at what happened yesterday, and you look at the big picture, the way the Pentagon's been acting, and the way they're not funding the veterans, where the death penalties are not passed forward. If you just juxtapose the fact that this is not 2013, but if you go back to 2006, 2007, now think about this. The outrage that people felt towards George Bush because they didn't want the surge to work, or that Donald Rumsfeld give the army that you're given, they could not take a deep breath or turn around without being criticized. Compare this Secretary of Defense and the lack of heat that he has felt, and the President and the lack of heat that he has felt, to the past one. That's what Bernie Goldberg did last night.
If George Bush were president when this screw-up happened, and Donald Rumsfeld were Secretary of Defense, they would have been hammered. Bush would have been portrayed as a hopeless dunce and Rumsfeld as a bloodless technocrat. But now the blame hasn't been put on the president, even though you correctly said he could have signed an executive order, nor on Hagel. You know, God knows where he was during this whole thing. But it's being blamed. Where blame is assessed, it's being blamed on the shutdown. And we all know what that means. The shutdown is the Republicans' fault. That's how the American people are seeing it. So I do think that the president and the Secretary of Defense, they got off kind of easy on the coverage.
They did. Just goes to show you a double standard. But we talk about that every day.
Absolutely.